In this episode, we're setting up respawn mechanics, both for our player character here, but also for AI characters. Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. And so far in this series, we have damage, we have death, and this is the last piece of the puzzle, right? This is respawning. Respawning is typical for most games, but what might not be typical is we need to have a mechanism that preserves all gameplay abilities both on our player character, but also on our AI adversary character. And it's a little bit different for AI controllers versus player controllers to keep those gameplay abilities, so we'll go over how to do that. And here are the key concepts for today. Game mode, we've already covered a little bit in this series, but in short, the game mode is what contains the rules of the game. So it makes sense that respawning logic is going to be driven out of the game mode because we want all of our players, both our AI characters, but also our player character, to ultimately have all the respawn logic work the same way and have it all live in one central location, which is our game mode. And event dispatching is another form of blueprint to blueprint communication that we have yet to cover in this series. This is the first time. And to be honest, this is the first time that I've used event dispatchers in any blueprint logic because, quite frankly, I haven't seen the need. But the engine recommendation is for death to use event dispatchers. And I think the reason for that is where most of the blueprint communication is outward, right? So we have one blueprint and we need to communicate to another blueprint. We can use casting. If we don't know what blueprint we're communicating to, we can still use an interface. But with event dispatching, it's basically the other direction in that it's still outward, but first the event dispatcher is listening. It's basically waiting for something to happen in the game world. In this case, it's character death. And so it listens, and if that thing occurs, then it executes some blueprint logic, the communication. With this episode, we're starting to get really close to having a genuine prototype of gameplay. So let's get to it. All right, so we're going to start by going into our game mode and setting up the event dispatcher. And the event dispatcher is the mechanism that's actually going to basically listen for our player's death. And this is the third way of communicating between blueprints. So we've already covered in many episodes casting, then we've also covered interfaces in a couple different episodes, and this is the third, and I think there are other ways, but this is the third main one. So I'm going to go to my content drawer, and all the way back in, I think it was episode 3 of the series, we put our game mode directly here in our core folder. So I'll go into that. And when you expand that, you'll need to open the full blueprint editor. So down here on the left-hand side, underneath the My Blueprint panel, we have to hit +sign for event dispatcher. I'm going to name it on player died. And we'll compile that, and then we're going to add an input. So right up here in the details panel, +sign, and this is going to be our character, and it's going to be of type, well, character. And we'll choose this one down here, character object reference. So I'll compile again, and then we'll right click on our event graph and we'll search for event begin play right there. And on begin play, we are going to bind event on player died. So bind event on player died. So our event dispatcher is going to be listening during the game. And in the event that our player dies, then consider it having been called, and it's going to call whatever event we attach it to here. And so we'll set up a new custom event and we'll call it player died. So from player died, we got our character, our input. From there, we can get the controller just like this. And from here, we can restart player and then connect this up just like this. And we see that we've got restart player, which is an existing function that's on all game modes. So we'll compile and save our game mode, and we'll keep that open for now because we have some more setup that we need to do on it. But let's first go to our third person character. And on the third person character, what we need to do is we need to override the destroyed function. So we've overridden functions on a few different episodes, but basically destroyed is a function that's on every single actor. And we see all the different functions that our third person character is inheriting either from actor or character. So when this particular actor is destroyed, our third person character, it's going to be doing some additional things in addition to simply being destroyed. So I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to move on destroyed up, and we're going to put it directly underneath the fade to black here, 5 seconds. So actually these timelines here, I'm going to move those down. Just make a little bit space. And then when event destroyed is called, we are going to get our game mode, get game mode. And from our game mode, we are going to cast to BP third person game mode, connect this up here. And then as BP third person game mode, we can call our event dispatcher. So call on player died. And the character that we're calling that with is going to be ourself. Get a reference to self and connect this up. And we also have to create a brand new function. And the reason we have to create a new function, or the way I'm going to do it is by creating a new function, is we need something to call this event destroyed. And if you remember from previous episodes, we have both our character death and our character death ocean function. And we're going to call that new function that actually destroys the actor and then respawns our character. We're going to call that new function that we're about to create from both of these functions here. And there could be other causes of death in the game that we're making along the way. So we want a function for destroying and respawning the character that we can call from basically any cause of death. So we'll go over here and do a new function, and I'm going to call this destroy and respawn character, no spaces. So what this function is going to do is it's first going to destroy the actor, and then once it destroys the actor, we're going to get game mode, and then we're going to tell it to, well, first we have to cast to BP third person game mode, connect this up like this, and there's an existing function on all game modes that is restart player at transform. And so what we can do is we can take our existing controller. So under references, we have our player controller reference here. We don't want to destroy our controller because we want the controller to persist across characters, like as the respawning occurs. Because the controller has all of our gameplay abilities, all that other stuff that we don't want to lose upon death. So we'll connect this up here to new player. And then from spawn transform, I'm just going to make a transform, not a relative transform. We're going to make a transform. And this we're going to do more next episode, so we could do a respawn at a random location. But for now, we're going to keep it really simple. It's going to spawn at 000 and Z1000 just to make sure it's above the ground. All right, so if you got all that, destroy and respawn character. Actually, I'm going to make a little bit more space in our event graph. We'll compile and save this. And we need to attach this to two different functions. So our character death function and character death ocean. I'll start in character death. And if I zoom out, we're going to do this all the way over here. And I'm going to do it right before our post-process damage dynamic material. So I'm going to make some space over here. And the way I'm going to do this, I'm actually going to set a timer by function. And the reason we're going to do that is because I want to wait a few seconds for like the fade to black to occur before the respawn actually happens. So we get our function name over here, right click, rename, destroy, and respawn character. Make sure no spaces, paste that in the function name. Time set to 5 seconds. So then I can copy this set timer by function name. We can go over to character death ocean. I'm going to do the same exact thing. Make some space right before post-process damage dynamic material. Paste that in here. Connect this up like this like this. Compile and save. All right, so we're really close to being able to test this. Let's go back to our event graph. What I'm going to do, this is just for convenience, but I'm going to set up a second button. Let's set up keyboard B. And what that's going to do is it's just going to be set to do 100 damage or like 110 damage to our player character. And that way he'll die right away and we can test respawning really efficiently. So what I'll do is when that's pressed, I will apply damage. The damage actor is going to be the self. So get a reference to self, connect this up. Let's do 110 just to make sure we break that threshold of 100. All the rest of this can be blank. That's totally fine. Compile and save again. And we are ready to test this out. So we'll minimize this, and right next to our gameplay abilities, let's right-click play from here, and make sure you don't have an AI character yet in the world. So we'll just do this ourselves for now. So right-click play from here, and pick up a few different abilities. Fireball, air, flamethrower. Okay, and then B. And voila, we are deceased. And there we go. There we have it. We've respawned at 000 and 1000, so we're above sea level. And everything's working just fine, except if I go to use my gameplay abilities. So 1, 2, they're all grayed out. And when I escape out, we get a bunch of errors. So let's first fix our gameplay abilities, and then we'll fix this. So the way we're going to do this is we basically need to reset the HUD upon our respawn. And I found a really useful forum post on this that you could check out in the description below. But I'm just going to show you how we're going to do this step by step. And this is also how we would start with a brand new HUD, hotbar, inventory. But in our case, we actually want those gameplay abilities to persist past death. So let's go back over to our third person character. And I'll zoom back up to event destroyed here. We basically need to reinstantiate the HUD. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to detach the hotbar in the inventory from the HUD, and that's basically going to destroy that. So I can right click here, we can get a HUD reference, and then right above it, I'm going to get our ability hotbar. From our ability hotbar, we are going to remove from parent, and the parent is the HUD. So we'll connect this up. And then also from the HUD reference, we're going to get our ability inventory. And this one, we're also going to remove from parent. Now, if you only have a hotbar and no inventory, you only need to remove one. So we'll compile and save this. And the next thing is we need to reinstantiate the hotbar buttons, like what actual buttons we have on our hotbar. And the same thing goes for our inventory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a brand new function. So plus sign here, we're going to call this reinstantiate hotbar buttons. So I'm going to come over here to the right, and we are going to get access to our player controller. And then from our player controller, we'll get access to our hotbar, get gameplay ability hotbar. And from this, we're going to do a for each loop, and we'll connect that up here. First thing is we need to check to see, is each element valid? Because if it's not valid, we're not going to do anything. So I'm going to connect this up. And then from that array element, we're going to get our gameplay ability icon. And so we need to set our gameplay ability icon from our actual ability hotbar. We need to set that back in our HUD. So our HUD is coming from a macro. These are all the way back in the UI episodes. So under macros here, we have our gameplay ability UI, hotbar buttons. I can get a reference to that. And I can say get a copy at a particular array element. And that's this here. And we are going to set on this, we're going to set the ability image. And the ability image that we're going to set is this right here. Because basically what this is doing is getting our hotbar ability that's persisting across death because it's on our player controller, which doesn't die. And then we're setting that back on our HUD hotbar buttons via this gameplay ability icon here. And then also from this, we are going to set the button style. And all this is a very close match to our gameplay ability UI. And then when this is completed, what we're going to do is we're going to set this variable under hotbar. So gameplay ability UI, this hotbar slot active, we're going to make sure to set that to false. So I can drag in a reference to hotbar slot active. We're going to set that to false. So we'll compile and save this. And then back in our event graph, so I'm going to zoom out. We're going to come all the way up to begin play because when our character is created, it's going to execute the event begin play when the new character is respawned. And what we want to do here is we want to set a very slight delay, a very, very slight delay all the way at the beginning. So 0.2 seconds right there. And we want that very short delay there because we need a little bit of time between when the character is created and everything else that's going to happen here. Including if we come down to where we create our HUD. So we got to go a little bit past that. Actually, I'm going to move this over here because right after add to viewport, this is where we are going to reinstantiate our hotbar buttons. So I'm going to put this right here and I'll put a comment just for that one, make it a little bit taller. Puts hotbar buttons back to normal after respawn. So we'll compile and save this. We're still going to have an issue, but we're close to being done with our third person character here. And let's test it again. I'm going to move my camera speed to be very fast so I can go over there, play from here. All right, B. All right, so our gameplay abilities are no longer grayed out, but they are not activating. And if I escape, we're getting issues with the owner character reference. And the reason for that is our gameplay abilities, each of the gameplay ability actors are persisting across death, but the problem is they still have as an owner reference the original character that's now dead. So we need to reestablish the owner of those abilities upon respawn. So for that, we need to adjust a few things in our gameplay abilities. So under the content drawer, we got to go into our blueprints and our gameplay abilities, and then the gameplay ability parent actor. And we have to scroll up in our event graph up to here, event begin play. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to rearrange these slightly. So I'm going to disconnect from ABP owner character reference to actors to ignore decal line trace, disconnect this and disconnect this one. Because what I'm going to do is this attach actor to actor here. We're going to move this over. These three, the owner character ref, ABP owner character ref, and this, I'm going to collapse to a new function. And this one I'll just connect up right here. And we can expand this comment to encapsulate both. I'm going to move this up and move these three down just like this. I'm going to take all these nodes here, owner character ref, ABP owner character ref, attach actor to component. We are going to collapse those to a function. And I'm going to name this overall function. It's going to be set gameplay ability owner references, no spaces. And then I can take these and drag them over, connect this up right here, just like that. Compile and save. And then because of the new function we just created for reinstantiating our hotbar buttons, we can also basically reinstantiate our gameplay ability owner references the same way. So if we go back to our third person character, back over to that function, first thing we need to do is we need to make some space and get our array element here. I'm going to add a reroute, and then I'm going to add another reroute. And following that, what we need to do is we need to set a new owner. So set owner. And the new owner is going to be self. It's going to be the newly spawned character. So the new owner, self, because you got to think of all the destroy stuff in the event dispatcher. That's happening on the old character when the old character dies. And then on the new character, when the new character is respawned, that's what's happening here. And that's happening on event begin play. All right, back to reinstantiate hotbar buttons. So we set the new owner of each of our abilities, and it's each of our abilities because we're doing a for each loop. And then we also need to call that function that we just created, that we just collapsed. So set gameplay ability owner references. So now that we have a new owner of each gameplay ability, now we can set the references. All right, so compile and save this, and we're ready to test one more time. All right, we got our gameplay abilities. B. Respawn. All right, can I use our gameplay abilities? Yes, they're working. But there are still some problems because if I try to move our gameplay abilities, not working. So what's going on there? And we get issues, access none, set local temporary ability image, move image within hotbar. So let's close out of this. And now let's go back to the content drawer, back to content, into core. I'll show you the last thing we need. It's in the my player controller. So this one's in the controller rather than the character. I've got a ton of functions open here. I'm just gonna close the vast majority of these. So on our event graph, the event begin play, the setting of the character reference, this we need to reset whenever we respawn the character. So we got to collapse this to a function, collapse. And the new function, I'm going to rename it set character reference, compile and save our controller. Back to third person character, the same function, reinstantiate hotbar buttons. And then at the end, after completed here, this is where we need to reset our player controller reference. So get player controller reference, and we need to say set character reference. And that's going to call that function. Compile and save here. It's basically resetting the reference. All right, test again. We're getting close. I promise we're getting close. We got our abilities. B. All right, our abilities still work. If I try to drag things around, they work because all of our references are now valid. Everything's good. Even into the inventory, yep, so far so good. So now the last piece of this is we still have to do the same thing for our adversary AI character. So let's do that. So the first thing is let's go back to our third person character blueprint. So over here into our event graph, and I'm just going to come all the way down to where we're doing damage directly to ourself. And now we're going to change this to our adversary AI character. So we'll create some space here and then we'll get actor of class. Connect this up. This is going to be our BP adversary AI character. Connect this up here. Instead of self, connect this and delete out self. So we can compile and save this, and let's drag our AI into the world. But let's bring our AI in right around the 0, mark, because that's going to make respawning a lot easier to test. So content drawer, adversary AI character, right around here. Right click, play from here, and B. Well, that worked in terms of the killing. But what about the respawning? Nothing. And also when I exit out, I get some errors. And so to fix this, we're going to create a brand new event for non-player character death directly on our game mode. So very similar to what we did for our player character, we're just going to go right back to our game mode, third person game mode here. And we'll create a new event dispatcher, and we'll call this on non-player character died. And we'll do a plus sign for an input, and this is going to be our AI controller. And the reason we're going to use our AI controller as an input is we're going to pass our AI's controller from the dying character over to the living character. And that way all the gameplay abilities will come right over with it. And so we got to change the type of this variable to be our adversary AI controller. This one right here, object reference. Make sure you get that to be controller and not character. So compile and save. So then we can drag out here from event begin play, and we can bind event on non-player character died. And we could drag out from the event. We're going to create a brand new custom event. This one's going to be non-player character died. And then we got our AI controller input right there. All right, so here's what we're going to do when our non-player character dies. So we're actually going to spawn a new AI character. There is a node that's actually spawn AI from class, but what this does is it also spawns a brand new controller. Now, if you wanted your AI to be completely reset, like nothing on the controller would persist past death, then that's what you would do. It's not going to work for us because our controller has gameplay abilities and we want the AI to continue to be able to use the abilities past death. So instead, we're going to do spawn actor from class. And for our spawn transform, we're going to make transform, and we're going to do the same thing that we did before, which is we're going to set that to be Z1000 or whatever you set to for your third person character. And then the class here is going to be our BP adversary AI character. So we're going to take our AI controller next, and we are going to possess. I'm going to take hold with the ghost, and I'll put in a little reroute here, go directly underneath, one right there. And then what we're possessing is what we spawn right here. So make sure you got that bind event to non-player character died. Make sure you got all this, make transform a positive value. So compile and save this. So the next thing we need to do, so for BP third person character on destroyed, so we overrode this right here, this event destroyed, and we don't want to call on player died because that's for our player dying. So what I'm going to do on our adversary AI character, so here we're going to override this. So I open that up, we're going to go back to the event graph, come down to the bottom, and under functions, we are going to override destroyed. And we're going to override it with absolutely nothing. We don't need anything to happen for our AI character. We just need to make sure it's not getting what our third person character is doing right over here. So compile and save our adversary AI character. But then you might be thinking, why aren't we actually replicating this right here? Except instead of calling on player died, we should be calling non-player character died, right? And I ran into some trouble replicating it. And the reason is because if you destroy the actor before you repossess your new AI character, the destruction takes the AI controller with it. And so what we need to do is we need to unpossess and then repossess with the new character and then destroy. And to figure that out with our AI character, it was just a lot of trial and error. So we're going to go back over to our third person character and into the destroy and respawn character function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some space before here because we don't want to destroy right away for our AI character. And instead, what we're going to do, if we expand references over here, we're going to get a reference to whether or not this character is a player controller. If it is a player controller, then it's going to go ahead and do its thing, all of this. But if it's not a player controller, what we're going to do is we're going to cast to BP adversary AI character, not ABP. BP, adversary AI character, and the cast is going to be ourself, because remember, adversary AI character inherits from our third person character. And from here, we're going to get a reference to our AI controller. So get AI controller reference. And the first thing is we need to unpossess. So we need to say, okay, you're about to die. So unpossess, connect this up. And then we can do all this fun stuff over here. So I can get our game mode, cast to BP third person game mode. I'm going to paste these both down here, connect this up. And from as BP third person game mode, this is where I can call on non-player died. So call on non-player died here. So if you don't have that little envelope in the top right corner, that's a common mistake here. So call, yeah, so don't pick the call function, call these down here. This one, call on non-player character died. Is it envelope or envelope? I've heard both ways. Maybe if you're British. AI controller reference connected up right here, put in a reroute, and then following this, like following passing in the reference, then because it's unpossessed, we can safely destroy actor. So if you got all that, so player controller is false, then it does all this fun stuff. And we don't need to hook up this function because it's already hooked up in the two different functions that cause death, character death ocean and the regular character death function. So this right here. All right, so compile and save, and we are ready to test. Play from here. He's running, and face plant. All right, let's see. Does he respawn? Yes, he does, but he's not moving, not in the slightest. And if I escape out, whole bunch of issues. Well, actually, it's just one issue, right? Reestablish closest acquisition. And I found a really good Reddit post that has a lot of the common issues with respawning AI characters, so I'm going to link it in the description below, but it contained the solution to this particular issue. And that's the fact. So if we go back into our adversary AI character, specifically on the event graph, we got to come up to event begin play. So when the character gets spawned, often this gets executed before other things. So one good practice is to just put a very slight delay at the beginning of event begin play, because as soon as it's spawned, this thing gets called. So we're going to do a delay of like 0.2 seconds. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take all these and move them over so they keep them in line. Compile and save. Yeah, it's this post right here. Sometimes your controller doesn't have enough time to possess the pawn. If you're doing cast a controlled pawn at begin play, it fails and the AI just stands still. So then after we do that, let's do one more test. Face plants like a champ. Does he respawn? Yes. And he's jumping like a madman, but he's still not moving. So why isn't he moving? And this took me much longer than it should have to figure out, because in death, what we do is we disable a lot of the controller input, and that controller is persisting past death. So all we need to do is we need to reestablish everything that the AI controller was doing prior to death. So if we back out of this, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So if we go to the third person character into the character death function, and if we come over to the left, so where our AI character is dying, this right here, AI disable controller input, because what this is doing on our animation blueprint, so it's getting the controller and it's saying, okay, set ignore move input, and it's setting our path following component to inactive, all this stuff. But luckily we already have a function for enable controller input. So under AI character here, yeah, this AI enable controller input that we created a few episodes back. And I'll show you that really quick. So all that's doing is once again getting our controller, casting to adversary AI controller, setting ignore move input to false so that it does use move input, and setting our path following component to active and actions component to active. So that should reestablish all of our AI character movement. So we can close out of this. We don't need that. If we go into our BP adversary AI character and go to the end of this, well, not actually the end. So after the AI controller reference, it has to be after we establish our controller reference. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take all this stuff, I'll move it out a little bit, and actually I can shrink this down considerably because we only have one camera now. And okay, so right after our AI controller reference here, what we're going to do is we're just going to get a reference to our animation blueprint, because the function that I was just referring to is on our animation blueprint. So Actually, it's AnimBP reference. Yeah, get AnimBP reference, and we can call AI enable controller input and connect this up. And then connect this up here. And again, that has to be on begin play, and it has to be after this delay. Okay, compile and save. Now there's one other setting that you might need that I just want to show you, but I didn't actually need this setting, but they talk about it a lot in that same Reddit post. So in the BP adversary AI character, under details here, if you search for possess, you have this auto possessed AI. So it auto possesses as soon as you place in the world. But you can also auto possess AI placed in the world or spawned. And the reason we don't need that is because in our game mode, we're actually calling possess right here. So we don't need to possess it automatically because we're possessing it from our AI controller this way. So now we have to test, can our AI character still use abilities, the abilities that he picks up after respawn? And to test that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fly over, well, let me increase my camera speed even faster. Let's do 7. Yeah, and we're going to take these 3 gameplay abilities we have by the beach, and I'm going to keep them by the beach. I'm just going to, man, I'm still doing Control-C copy, Control-V paste, Control-D to duplicate, and then move them over to that central location just to make it a lot more convenient for your AI. Lower down my camera speed, move them above ground. That would be helpful to pick up. Maybe something like this. I'll just move this one down. That's looking good. All right, play from here. He's got our abilities. And then B. Ah, poor guy. And does he respawn? Okay, he's running around, but I press V, and even after pressing V, he's looking at me. So you can tell he wants to attack me, but nothing's happening. Why? Because we've got the same issue that we had with our third person character, which is the fact that all of the gameplay abilities that our AI character had, they still have the owner of the original character who's now dead. So when we escape out of this, yeah, attempted to access BP adversary AI character property via owner character reference, but that character is dead. So here's how we're going to address that. So if we go back to our BP adversary AI character, we are going to override the same function that we just set up for our third person character, which is our reinstantiate hotbar buttons function. So this one down here, reinstantiate hotbar buttons. Now technically they're not buttons, but it's doing the same thing. It's basically reestablishing the owner of those gameplay abilities. So I can delete out the parent here, and we can get a reference to our AI controller, and from that we're going to get our hotbar buttons for our AI. Oh, not buttons, get gameplay ability hotbar right there. And from this we'll do a for each loop, connect this up. First we need to check, okay, each item in the gameplay ability hotbar, is it valid? Because we're not going to do anything if it's not valid. So connect this up. And if it is valid, then we're going to get a reference to our self, because the self is going to be our new owner. So drag out a pin from array element and say set owner. And the owner is going to be, well, the AI character himself. And I'm going to put in a reroute for this down here. And actually, I'm going to move this reroute down, the self up, because we're going to, from this, we also need to set gameplay ability owner references. That's the other function that we set up on our actual gameplay ability. Connect this up. One more reroute just for funsies. So we got the reinstantiate hotbar buttons function, compile and save this. Then back over to our event graph for the adversary AI character. And we'll come back to right here, right where we enable the controller input. And following that, we will reinstantiate hotbar buttons. And all this stuff doesn't need to be that far out. Can drag it in, and I'll put in a comment for these and just say necessary for respawn mechanics. Slightly crooked lines, compile and save. All right, for this test, what we're going to do, play from here. And the first thing is he picks up the abilities. Then we're going to do V to see him attacking. As soon as he acquires a target, yep, there we go. And then B, he has been deceased. And then what we need to test is as soon as he respawns, V again, and see if he attacks. Whoa, there we go. And we have respawn game mechanics. But the first time I did this, I got some errors in our fireball. So we might as well fix these errors that I got, even though I'm not getting them now, which of course happens when I prep, I get errors. And then when I do this for real, I don't get errors. It's okay. So we're going to fix it regardless. So we got to turn our, you're getting to see my notes here. So we're going to turn our get for our fireball intensity. We're going to turn that into a validated get over on our BP fireball actor. So let's go over to content drawer. Let's go over to content, into blueprints, into spawn from abilities, into our BP fireball. And it's coming from this age fireball right here. So this fireball Niagara system, in case it's not valid. So I can move these out, move this out, right click, turn that into a validated get. Connect this up here. If it's not valid, then go over here, put in a reroute. You guys got this by now. Another reroute. and compile and save that. So we still have one more test that we should do if we're going to be thorough about this, and that is we should test respawning following the tentacle grab, because I would be remiss if I didn't do that. So I'm going to close out a BP Fireball. We're not going to need that anymore. And let's actually move our AI character over to the ocean. Let's do this for real. But we got to do it close to the gameplay abilities so that he's running in that correct direction. So move him over, swing him around, maybe here-ish, dip his toes in the water, and play from here. See if the tentacle comes out. Yep. And it's coming. We have our cutscene. And does he die? Does he disappear out the end? Yep, he disappeared out of the end of the tentacle. And now I actually got to check to see if he respawned in the right location. There he is. Looking just fine. But we get some errors here, and I think it's because there's a slight delay between our character being grabbed and our character dying. So they're pretty easy to fix, so let's fix them. So the set tentacle summon counter, if we go into that, all we need to do, right click on our tentacle target here, also a validated get, connect this up just like this, finished down here to that. Move all of these over, compile and save this, and we can close out a BP tentacle, but there's a few others where you might get the same issues. So this reestablish closest acquisition, I got the same issue for this function. And so if I come over here to the left, so our AI controller reference, so in that 0.2 seconds where we don't have an AI controller, you might get that one. So you can convert to a validated get, connect this up here, is valid, then go on. Something like that. That looks good. Compile and save. And the last one where I got some errors, I think once again, it was because of the 0.2 second delay. If we go into our ABP third person character, basically it's all of the line traces in our footsteps. So footsteps sphere trace by channel. So our character reference here, I'm just going to convert it to a validated get. Same thing. On to the next one. And this is just good practice. And to be honest, I didn't even know about validated gets when I created these functions. That's how far I've come in this process. So compile and save. Profile left, same thing. On to the right. And last but not least, footsteps sphere trace by channel left short. I think I spelled it wrong. Doesn't matter. And compile and save. So now we can test our own death. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move our AI character out of the water. Go to the other side of the island. Going to move him out. And for this test, it's probably a good idea that you pick up abilities first before you casually go for a morning stroll in the ocean. All right, let's fireball the tentacle, shall we? Yeah, it didn't work so well. Do I respawn? Can I use abilities? Yeah, so far so good. So we just got a tiny little bit of cleanup to do, as we do at the end of every episode. We can close out of our ABP third person character, don't need that. So let's go over to our BP third person character. So we have two new functions, destroy and respawn character, reinstantiate hotbar buttons. So both of these I'm going to categorize under respawn. This one too, respawn. Compile and save that. And then back to our gameplay ability parent actor. So this set gameplay ability owner references, I'm just going to categorize that under references. Compile and save that. So that concludes our episode for today. And in our next episode, we're basically taking respawning to the next step, which is figuring out the optimal placement for our character to respawn, because it's going to be based on where all the other characters are in the level, and we want to make sure to respawn far away from other characters. But not only that, when you die and respawn, I figure it's best to give the character who died a little bit of an advantage, and that is we are going to face, upon respawning, the closest gameplay ability pickup. So I hope to see you there next episode.